everybody, I'm Rebecca here at Why Mermaids. I want to talk about why the classics are important and why you should read them, but maybe not in high school. Now, I am a high school teacher. I taught high school English for 2 years before jumping over into the journalism world. So I'm a little biased because I also really love the classics, but I also feel that the classics are maybe not the right thing to read in high school. So first off, let me tell you why the classics are important and why you should read them. They are the classics. They connect you to people throughout all space and time because the classics are read by people from all over the world throughout all the different generations because a lot of people do read them in high school. They were their hallmarks of achievement for their time period, whether it was because they were depicting accurate life as it was, or they were presenting information that had not yet been thought of or presented, and it was kind of like a shocker to the people of that time about where the world could possibly be going. They better your vocabulary, and they force you to read and to think critically, and they are tough to read so that makes your brain work more and it actually sort of makes you smarter. They're just simply great stories. The classics depict human life as it is, as it was, as it will be. A lot of the things that were present in them, the characters, the emotions, the themes, all of those things that were present then are still present now. You can still connect to them, and it shows how human life is ever evolving and staying similar at the same time. And so it's really great to read something from the 1800s, from the 1600s, from the 1900s, and see how people have changed and how we still can relate to how they were at that time. And that is why the classics are so important to read. The problem with reading classics in high school, however, there are a couple. The first one being they are tough to read. Like I said earlier, they can be a challenge. And for students who don't like reading or struggle with reading, classics are not going to make them want to read. They're going to associate reading with something that is hard or something that is boring, something they don't enjoy. And they're not going to really get that love of reading that some people have. They are tough to focus on and understand. And a lot of times, these classic books, you read them in school and then they are dissected and analyzed to the point where they don't care anymore. The students don't care what the green light at the end of Gatsby means, and they get tired of a story that they once enjoyed, now they hate because of that overanalyzation of them. Some of the themes in classics are really tough to relate to, or they might be too complex or adult for teenagers. I love reading. I am someone who read every single assigned reading for high school. I was not one of those kids who did the Spark Notes or whatever, but I still found some of them I did not enjoy. I hated Julius Caesar and Antigone. Now, reading them 10 years later, I really enjoy them. I think if I'd read Gatsby in high school, I might not have enjoyed it as much, but I read it in college instead. And I loved it. I fell in love with it instead. So I don't think that just because it's a classic, you should have to read it in high school. Because sometimes those themes, they're written by people who are a lot older and they're not necessarily written for teenage minds. Another problem I have with reading them in high school is that high schoolers have a lot on their minds. They have a lot of things to do. They have drama, they have friends, they have activities, they have other homework and other classes. They're not going to have the time to go home and pore over this big, thick classic book that they cannot get into because it's too dense or the words, it's written in a way that's tough to understand or the words are big and they have to look them up. They're not going to put that kind of time into it. So what they're going to do instead is they're going to Spark Notes it, or they're going to just skim the book, or they're just not going to read it at all and they'll just watch the movie. I had friends that did this. And what are they really getting out of that classic besides they're now, associating it with something that they didn't like? I read Great Expectations in school and I absolutely hated it because it was so tough to get through. And I just don't think that I was at the right age to read it. And now I have a complete thing against Dickens because I hated that one so much that I can't read Dickens. I just can't do it. And I really need to get back into it. But at the time, I was so done with Great Expectations that I just did not want to do any more Dickens whatsoever. Now, there are a few classic books that you should stick to, that teachers should definitely still include in their teaching. Such things like To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, this one is a absolute classic, and most students who read it do find that they enjoy it. Another one is Of Mice and Men. It's easy, it's small, it's relatable, it's written in a way that's not too tough, and again, a lot of students who read it end up enjoying it. Shakespeare, I feel like at least one, maybe not the overdoneness that Shakespeare is. I feel like you read a Shakespeare play in every single grade once you hit high school, and I feel like that might be too much, but at least one. Romeo and Juliet is a one that's easy to get through. Most people know the story. And if not, it's something that teenagers can kind of feel like they relate to, whether they've seen it in other plays, they've seen the adaptations, they can get Romeo and Juliet. Another easy one is A Midsummer Night's Dream, or even Taming of the Shrew. Those are easier ones to get through, maybe not as dense as something as Julius Caesar, which is very political, and while I like it as an adult, like I said, in high school I was not a fan. So, what do you do instead? Okay, you read a classic here and there, but you pair it with something else. You pair it with something modern and contemporary to help the students make those themes relatable and make them connect in ways that they wouldn't just get from that classic. Another option is to choose a modern or contemporary book that's considered a modern classic with similar themes to the other classics that you're going through, but that students can relate to and possibly get into a little bit better. Most of the students that I've talked to about this subject, they seem to really like the stories that they read that are more modern rather than these classics that are tougher to get into. The big thing to do now is actually having students choose their own book that they want to read, and it can be anything, and encouraging them to find a book that they really enjoy, and if they don't enjoy it, to put it down and find something new. And instead of teaching the themes from one specific book or the concepts, you talk about an idea or a concept or a theme, and then you say, how does this relate to the book you're reading? And having one-on-one sessions rather than big giant class discussions over the same book. As someone who, again, I taught English, I still sort of am in that world a little bit. I love reading and I loved English class. It was my favorite class, but I still found English class boring sometimes, even if I love to read. My fiance hates reading. He was not encouraged to read, and every time he had to read in school, he read things like the classics, and he didn't even read, like he read them, but he doesn't remember anything about them. When I asked him, what books did you read in high school that you enjoyed? He said none. The only book he's ever read that he enjoyed was a Halo book, and if only he had a teacher or had someone there to help him and force him find books that he really enjoyed reading at a young age and encouraged that love of reading, or that just even like of reading, or not hatred of reading, he might find reading be something that he enjoys more than he does now. Now he'll still read things. He reads articles and he reads like nonfiction books or books on like self-help type stuff or like how to make money kind of books, but he doesn't find the enjoyment in reading that I do, and I really wish that I could have like been there when he was younger to help him pick out that book that he loves, but now he's almost too old to really care enough to want to do it, and that makes me really sad, and I see this in my students all the time. My goal as an English teacher in life was I just want to make kids fall in love with reading the way I do, which is why even though I had to teach some of those classics, I paired them with things like The Hunger Games, which I had students who had hated reading before. They actually, once we read The Hunger Games, they went and got the other two and became obsessed with that story and enjoyed reading. And just finding those books and fostering those relationships with students, just really encouraging them to like reading is so important. And really, that's kind of the point to me for English class and high school English. It's not to make them read books about these classic themes that they're not getting anyway. My whole point is that, yes, the classics are absolutely important. I love them, I've read a lot of them, and I still read them now because I know that they are classic books for a reason, and they are good books, and I love some of them, and I love some of the stories. I include them in some of my favorite books. But had I read some of them in high school, again, Great Expectations, I couldn't get into it, and now I have a hatred for it because of high school. And I feel that, yes, you should read the classics, but maybe not in high school. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and that's it for me. I will see you tomorrow.